G'day and welcome to the first in hopefully a long series of brewing videos where I've approached a local brewery and they're going to help me out with one of their recipes and we're going to brew it here. And the first one today is this. This is my version of the Bridge Road Brewers Celtic Red, one of my favourite beers from Bridge Road, and they were kind enough to share the recipe so we get to brew it here today. Again, the main purpose of these recipes are to promote independent local breweries. This video has been 18 months in the works. Of course, due to the circumstances at the moment, I haven't been able to get up to Beechworth again. I've been going to Beechworth since around 2005. I stumbled across their brewery on a visit to Beechworth, and ever since I've been going back maybe once, twice a year. I just love it there. I've nearly tried to convince the wife to move there. It's only her job that's stopped us a few times. But if you don't know where it is, I'll show you a little map. It's not far from Melbourne. And the family and I visit there loads of times. I try to go every year to their Hop Harvest Festival. That's a great event. They also do Oktoberfest and many other things there. You should get out there and check it out if you can. As I mentioned, I haven't been able to get up there and take any more new footage. So I've got a few photos from the past. And I'll play a little bit of their own footage. You'll see me in it anyway. And we'll have a look at that just before we get into the recipe.
Established in 2005, Bridge Road Brewers is located in Beechworth, in Victoria's High Country. When creating a new beer, we take influence from our region and its unique landscape, as well as local producers and local personalities. We also take inspiration from our brewing peers. When crafting a new beer, flavour always comes first. We source the best quality ingredients we can lay our hands on. We also draw on our years of experience. We've created hundreds of new beers since 2005, and we've probably drunk thousands of them. At Bridge Road Brewers, we take our craft seriously. Flavour and quality take priority. Attention is given to the beer we craft throughout its life, right through from brew day and fermentation, as well as when we're bottling and packaging. Quality is checked and monitored to ensure that we provide our customers with the best beer experiences possible. And perhaps the most important part of crafting our beer is being able to sit down at the end of the day and enjoy drinking it together.
My favourite beers from Bridge Road, Pale Ale. I love their Pale Ale. I love the Celtic Red. Some of the new hoppy ones are good, the new hop haze ones, and the different versions of the Bling IPA are good too. I also enjoy their Mayday Hills. I have some coming in the mail. I purchased one of the new ones, which I'll do a beer review on later. But it's time to stop chatting and brew some beer. You'll notice when you look at the recipe that it's all Gladfield malts. That's the recipe I was given, so that's what I'm using, of course. If you can't find Gladfield malts, I'll leave a link below that has a Gladfield malt substitution chart. But it's light chocolate, light crystal, redback and Aurora. When I'm after these specialty Gladfield malts, I usually go to Beerco because they tend to stock more of the specialty than other shops do. I'll leave a link below for them as well. And before you start in the comments, no, I'm not sponsored by Gladfield, although I'd like to be and probably should be. And I'm not sponsored by Beerco. I'm actually not sponsored by anybody. If you are substituting the malts, I recommend having a look at that chart because pale chocolate in one country is totally different to another country or to another company. Same with the light crystal. They can be very, very different even though the names are similar. So I start with my usual 20 litres of water. I went with a balanced water profile. I actually looked up the Irish Red profile on Brewfather and it had like a hoppy profile and I didn't think that was right. So I chose to go with just a balanced one to start with. And maybe next time I brew it, I'm going to try the multi water profile. And as usual, some rice hulls. And I put the grain in. Give it a good stir. For mash temps, you want to mash in around 66 degrees. And I actually set the RoboBrew after mashing to 62 degrees. I've brewed this twice, and the first time I went a little bit high and I couldn't get it to ferment right down to 1010 like the recipe said. But the second batch I mashed at 62 degrees and that fermented right down to the 1010. So then I leave it for 5 minutes to settle, come back, try turning the pump on, make sure we've got some flow. With this kind of grain bill, you shouldn't have any worries. Gladfield are really good with their grain. They're very uniform, so you should be able to get a nice clean crush. But I'll still start the flow a little slow, just in case. I'll hang around for a few minutes. As you see there, the colour change, and I can see that it's flowing well. But I'll put the lid on, and I'll come back and just check it in another 5 minutes. And you can see there that the flow looks fine, hasn't built up at all. Maybe half a centimetre, that's what you expect, half an inch. So I just leave it again, come back and check. By this stage we've left it a few times, 5 minutes each time, so it's time to take a pH test. You've had a bit of flow, you've had 15 minutes for the mash to settle in. Look at that colour. I'll whack that in the freezer to cool down. We'll get a reading. Sometimes I get told that I'm too fancy, but you don't need to take pH readings. I do it for my own interest and to show you guys. That doesn't mean you have to do it to make this beer. As you can see, it's looking beautiful and clear, and that colour is to die for. Because we're mashing low, I'll mash for at least 75 minutes, just because the conversion can be a little bit slower. Very likely it would have been done after 60 minutes, but I just like to give it a bit more of a chance. And when the mash time is up, I put it into mash out. I give it 10 minutes ramp time, 10 minutes mash out. It's about 20 minutes. I've set it at 76 degrees. And we have a look after mash out, and it's beautiful. Beautiful and clear, lovely colour. So then it's time to pull the mash pipe. And as soon as I've pulled the mash pipe, I start sparging, of course. Now we mashed in with 20 litres. To get 22, 23 litres out of my Brewzilla, I find I have to sparge with about 15 litres. Sometimes it may be a little bit more, sometimes it may be a little bit less from the grain absorption. The best way to do it, I find, is just to sparge until you get to that 30 litre mark on the Brewzilla or Robo Brew. And that way, after an hour's boil, you'll end up with 22 or 23 litres. You can see there we have our 30 litres, which is perfect. I add my salts. I set up my strainer just to strain while I'm coming up to the boil, just in case any grain got through. And as I'm coming up to the boil, I add some firm cap just to stop any boil overs. And you'll see here that there was hardly any junk in there. That's really good. And once we're boiling, I take a reading. I chill down the reading sample, and we are 11.4 bricks, which is 1.046. I was looking for 1.045, so we are 1 point up. We're using Northern Brewer to bitter, and I'm putting in 8 grams for the 60-minute boil. When I'm bittering with a small amount of hops like this, I like to make sure that all those bits that get stuck on the side end up in the wort. I think we need every last bit of them. Next is the 20-minute edition. The last 20 minutes, I'm putting in 15 grams of East Kent Goldings, or EKG. And then for the last 10 minutes of the boil, I put in 15 grams of Willamette. And at the same time I put in some yeast nutrient. I think it's important when using SO4, anything to help it. Also take a little bit of wort. I add some Whirlpool, only half a Whirlpool there. And I also add PVPP. It's just another clarifying agent. Also helps with tannins and things like that as well. Give it a good mix and add it back into the boiling wort. Once the boil is over, we turn off the elements and we do a 20-minute whirlpool. I just clamp the hose to the side of the Brewzilla, making sure it's pointing sideways, and turn on the pump. I cover it with some foil to stop the bugs getting in. I'll take a sample for another reading. Cool that down in a glass of water. You can see there that we're 12.9 bricks, or 1.052 gravity. Now I'm up 2 points, so haven't done bad at all today. What I do before the end of whirlpool time, I'll stop at 5 minutes before, just so the wort has a chance to settle and clear. And then we'll go straight through the plate chiller, or any chiller you have, and into my keg menter. And once it's done, I'll throw in my tilt. They'll be very handy for me for this kind of beer. They'll save me taking a lot of readings to try and follow that gravity as it gets down. And I also give this a good dose of oxygen. Now you don't have to go crazy with oxygen, you can just give it a stir, but 30 seconds to 45 seconds of a gentle flow of oxygen is all you need. You don't need to see it bubbling up, that's using too much and wasting too much. And just a hint, if you are using these wands or any sort of air stone, leave the oxygen on while you pull it out, otherwise the beer's just going to get right into that stone. So I leave the oxygen on, I put it in the sanitizer, let it go for a couple of seconds, and then I can turn it off. Now it's time for the yeast. I used SO4 in this, and we can talk about SO4. It is known for stalling, and it will stall if you don't look after it sometimes. What I mean by that is, yeah, I've thrown everything at it today. I've given it yeast nutrient, I've given it oxygen, and I follow the ferment. And even advised by Ben from Bridge Road, once it gets to that 1.025, you've really got to start looking after it. If you don't sort of keep it warm, the temperature will drop off and it'll stall and fall out. So what I do, once it gets to that 1025, I just start ramping the temperature up slowly, a degree or two a day, till she's finished. Now I know some people have brewed successfully with SO4 under pressure, but I'm taking every little bit of stress off this yeast. So I'm going to brew this under pressure, but it's going to be very, very low, like 1 or 2 psi, just really enough to keep the oxygen out and let the CO2 out. So the next morning I came out and turned it down to the 1 or 2 psi. And as I said before, once this gets down to the 1.025, I'm going to bump the temperature a bit just to help it finish off. I've thrown everything at it. Oxygen, 2 packets of yeast, yeast nutrient, and I'm going to ride the temperature to make sure this finishes off and doesn't stall on me. Just keep in mind, if you haven't got a tilt and are taking the readings manually, it's SO4. It could finish out, if the temp gets away from you, in a day, 2 days. So you've really got to keep an eye on it. And even though this might be finished in a couple of days, I'm still going to leave it a week. I've had it before from SO4 where it can throw a real lot of green apple flavours and off flavours if it gets a little bit stressed. And if you take it off the yeast too early, you'll be stuck with that in your beer. So it's a really good idea, even if you have a tilt and are following the points, to taste it. And I mean, that sort of goes for all the beers. But I've had troubles with SO4 in the past, and it's a good idea just to taste it, and try and smell anything that you don't think's right, and wait till it's gone in the fermenter before you package it. But besides that, there's no dry hops here. We're just going to leave it. I'll follow the gravity on the tilt and I'll start bumping that temp. I'm starting at about 18.5 degrees and then I'll slowly bump it up. Alright, we can see how the ferment went here. Ignore those wild fluctuations. They're actually from when I turned on another computer and it was calibrating my tilt. And it took me a couple of times to figure out what was going on, you know. But you can see here that the yeast would have been pitched late on the 18th of August. And by the 21st of August, it was virtually at final gravity. I left it there, you know, for a good few days. And then I crash chilled. and it looks like it's dropping points at the end, but that's what happens when you crash chill with a tilt. It tends to look like it's dropping more points. Now where I raise the temps are a little bit hard to see because of those wild bits, but I didn't have to raise them too much because the yeast was just powering through. I didn't have to worry too much about this, whereas the first ferment was a very different story. I haven't got a picture of that, but that stalled out at about 1017, and I did a forced ferment on a little bit of a sample, and I put some USO5 in there, and it did drop down a couple more points. So I ended up pitching some USO5 into that batch, and it did go down a few more points, but it still didn't get down to the 1010. When we get to the tastings, you'll see the two different side by side. They don't look very different, but they do taste different. When I was tasting the one that stalled, it had a huge amount of body, and it was a little bit sweet and really flavoursome. And I was tempted to leave it there, but I thought to upgrade my old force ferment video, that I'll do a force ferment on it, and we'll try and get it down. For the tasting. It's taken a little bit of time just after I've poured all the drinks and moved the camera around. So they've gone a little bit flat, but then this beer's not supposed to have a huge head anyway. Now that there is the Bridge Road one. That's number 2, and that's number 1. It's a bit hard with the different light behind them, but you can see, especially if I probably change them around a bit, they're pretty interchangeable. It's just sort of the light, the difference in light. Okay, so this is the Bridge Road. That's got a nice, it's nearly a fruity flavour. I'm guessing that it's probably a different yeast, because I used SO4. I'm not sure they would have used the SO4 in that. It's probably that other one I mentioned in the recipe. This is guessing though. It's my number 2. No, my number 1, and this is the number 2. Now my number 2 is much closer in aroma wise. Number 1, where I experimented a little bit for another video, because it stalled, I added USO5. Now that has definitely changed the aroma. More than I would have thought, because it had fermented down probably just under 10-20, and then stalled out. But it's affected the aroma a lot more than I thought. Like colour-wise, they all look the same. Where really number 1 was probably, via programs, how much you can trust them to be accurate, is probably about a point lighter than my second one. But, they're all pretty close. If you can tell the difference between those 3, you're doing pretty well. Main thing, the taste. Malty. Oh, give us another taste. a bit of sweetness there, a little bit of bitterness. Dances around in your mouth like a, you know, like an English style, I should say. It's Celtic, isn't it? But you know what I mean, those UK-driven ales. There's nearly a, I keep thinking I nearly pick it. It nearly tastes like it's been in a barrel. I don't think it has, but it's quite nice. I go to my number one, the one that I had issues with in the ferment. There's some similarities there, but it's not the same. I'm going to have a go at this number 2. Going to end up drunk by the end of this. Now, what I think I'm picking up here that is a bit of a difference is the water. Besides there's a different yeast aroma. Like we're going to get rid of number 1. That's out of the picture. Even though it's still a good drinkable beer. And I tell you what, when I tasted that at the stall, when it was stalled at like that 10.19, 10.20, 10.19, it was sensational. It was really good. You had the yeast and you had this big malty. I nearly should have just left it there, but I was wanting to do a forced ferment video. But anyway, we'll just drink the two that are closer to each other, you know what I mean? Look, they are very close. Very, very close. I think I would play with the water with mine. That's a very tasty beer. But that has a different mouthfeel. And I can only put it, I mean, if the grain bills are the same, to the water profile, pH, things like that. So I think that'll do for the tasting. If you like this beer, which you should, it's a cracker, get on it. Last time I was in the brewery, it was a while back now, because we haven't been able to go there with the lockdown and everything, but they had it on nitro. It was good. I had troubles telling which was which then, to look at the bottom of the glass. But anyway, cheers. Thanks very much again, Ben. Let's get back to the video. G'day. This is probably a week later. I was rambling on in that video. I compared the colour to the original many times. You couldn't see any difference. I just wanted to make it a bit shorter and a bit sweeter. It's cleared up again a bit just in that week. Oh, it's a bit hard to see in these lights. But if I was going to be super critical with my own brewing, and I'd probably mess around with the water profile a little bit more. I might try multi. This was, I made a balanced profile. I wasn't quite sure which one to go for. I quickly looked it up on Brewfather, and it had like a hoppy profile for an Irish red ale. I didn't think that sounded right. Maybe it is. But next time I think I'd try a multi water profile instead of a balanced. This was equal 75-75 chloride sulfate from memory. The only other thing I'd probably change is I probably wouldn't use SO4 by choice again. Like if I had to, it's still a nice beer, but I'd go for the 1968. I've used the Yeast 1968 before. It's White Yeast or White Labs? Anyway, the 1968, and that was one of the suggested yeasts, and I think that would be nicer. SO4 sometimes can be really nice, but I pretend to prefer the 1968. But besides that, that's about it. Representing, got the gear on. I just want to thank Ben again for the recipe, and James, the brewer. Cheers. Great beer. I've always liked this beer. If you like Irish red, give it a go. Cheers. Support independent breweries, support your local breweries. They need it, especially in this time. Yeah, get get to. Maybe you have to order from them, especially if you're in Victoria. You have to order, but that's fine. You get the freshest beer direct to your door. Cheers. Like, subscribe, share, all that jazz. Thanks to my patrons, because without them, these videos couldn't continue. All right, cheers. Thank you.